Hello everyone and welcome to this episode, the Working Mum one of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. I'm Andrew Jacobs. We've wanted to cover this topic for a while. We know there isn't a single way to be a mum, and finding a balance, seeking support and making decisions that work best for family are constant challenges, and we were really keen to get as many views as possible, and so we have three amazing guests to share their unique perspectives. Our first guest is Tracy Rotze. Tracy is an accomplished learning and development practitioner, trainer and leadership coach with 24 years commercial experience, and she has trained and coached thousands of professionals from first-time managers to senior executive level, both in the UK and internationally. Tracy is the director and founder of Practical Training Solutions Limited, who specialise in offering flexible learning solutions to fast-growing busy organisations. Our second guest is Amy Bond. Amy is an account executive for an award-winning learning technology company, passionate about empowering innovative learning and development professionals to drive engagement in their workforce and encourage a meaningful culture of social learning. Amy loves supporting progressive organisations, harnessing the power of impactful technology to close skills gaps and transform organisational performance. Our final guest is Carla Prout. Carla is a learning transformation consultant who has worked closely with her clients to develop and execute comprehensive learning strategies tailored to their unique needs. Whether you require a strategic partner to guide your learning initiatives or need custom training solutions, she's here to help. Recorded in May of this year, this is Women Talking About Learning. This is Tracy, Amy and Carla talking about working mums.
All right. Hi, ladies. Great to see you. Hi, Carla. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks. Yourself?
Yes, I'm excellent. And hi to Amy as well. And Carla, first of all, I'll start with you. What do you, what's really interesting to you about this topic? I know you're a mum, and we've sort of shared some of our photos already, haven't we?
Yes.
Ahead of this podcast. What's tell us about your background.
I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think once we sort of dive into it a little bit further, I've got quite unique views, I think, and maybe less traditional views when it comes to being a mum and a working mum. So I run my own business as well. My husband runs his own business as well. So we have some, I say on the fence views, because some people are totally for it and some people are totally against it. So I'm quite keen to see where this conversation goes. And I think I've got quite a different perspective to add to it, hence why I was quite keen to get involved. But my boy, he's 5, so quite a young boy at the moment, so quite new to being working mum in sort of some aspects of it. Learning every day, every year is different, and I think, I don't know how old your kids are, I'm trying to remember, but I think it's something that evolves all the time being a working parent. I think your child is just constantly changing and developing and growing, so once you get on top of one challenge, you're faced with a completely different one the following month. So it's quite a unique topic, quite an interesting topic, and definitely one that's close to the heart. So what about yourself, Tracy?
100%. I was interested to hear, I'm keen to hear your views on the fact that you were saying it's you don't have traditional views on it, but certainly, I mean, my kids are 9 and 7 now, and I've been freelance and running my own business since I had my kids, and it'd be keen to sort of see what your views on it as well, Carla, because I'm very lucky that I have a very supportive husband, that we share the jobs equally. It's not sort of traditional roles in our house or anything like that. And, for me, I think being a working mum is, it's a good role model to my kids. And part of the reason why I went freelance and set up my own business was to be able to work a little bit more flexibly as well. Because when I went on maternity leave, when I had my son, I had a job at the time that was split between London and Swindon, and they asked me to come back, and I'm thinking, it's just not going to work with the kids, and obviously having a newborn baby and everything. So that's kind of what was my inspiration for certainly going it alone and going freelance and setting up my business in something that I love, obviously training and coaching. So So what about you, Amy? What's your story?
So I'm so keen, as Tracy said, Carla, to hear your views now that you've really piqued my interest, saying that they're sort of on the fence. I'd love to know what they are. that sounds so interesting to me. But I'm relatively new to being a working mum. My little girl has just recently turned 2. So we're still in that whirlwind of toddler life. She has been, again, very, very lucky. As you said, Tracy, my husband is so supportive. And I'm very, very lucky to have one set of grandparents who live incredibly close, almost too close, you could say. But we're very, very lucky in the fact that I have people around me who are supportive in those ways. But even still, I think being a working mum is a whirlwind. And I'll be really keen to hear your experiences. I'm not sure. You said, Carla, that your husband runs his own business too.
Yes.
But one of the things that I have found really tricky is that even though I think workplaces are catching up in terms of being flexible for mums, I feel as though they are still so far behind in terms of being flexible for dads.
Yeah.
So whilst it's great to be the person who gets a little bit more flexibility, I do still feel as though that often puts a huge amount of the workload onto mums' shoulders. So I'd be, again, keen to really hear your thoughts on that one and how that's like for the two of you running your own businesses.
Yeah, I think it was a really tricky one because my husband set up his business about a year, I think, before our boy was born. And I think after my maternity and all, I think I was off for about 6 months. I didn't want to put my child into childcare at 6 months. I just felt he was too young, but I needed to get back to work. So me and my husband kind of knitted together, and thankfully we have a very supportive family, and we're in a very fortunate position that we were able to actually hire my mum full time. And so my mum stepped up and looked after my boy for it was about the first year, I think, that I was sort of trying to get back into work because I just felt, like I said, he was just too young. I didn't want to leave him with people I didn't know. So then I went back to kind of full-time work for a few months. That ended quite tragically, quite quickly. So, I mean, in my career, in my industry, I was made redundant quite a lot of times. It's a very contract-led role. I found it was very chippy-choppy. I jumped around a lot. So that safety element was really never there for me in work. And I think it was part of the reason, along with some of the stuff that you spoke about in terms of, wanting more flexibility around your family and everything. Those were some of the reasons that sort of pushed me into setting up my own business in the first place. And the first year of setting up that business was incredibly hard. And I think I was barely making money just to, pay the minimum and pay bills. Me and my husband ended up putting my boy into full-time childcare when he was just over a year old. My mum went back to work. That was hard as well, because I think at the time you don't get the help from the government until they're 2 years old. So he was about 1.5, and for a while we were having to pay full-time childcare. It was very expensive, very difficult. And then obviously we had things like with COVID, and that was an absolute nightmare. And every time he had the sniffles, they'd tell us we'd have to isolate him for 2 weeks. And both me and my husband are trying to grow and set up our businesses, and it was just becoming absolutely impossible. So we kind of went back to the drawing board again. We were like, we need to do something different. So we did a bit of a mixture where we'd put him in childcare a few days a week, but we also hired my mum back. And again, so fortunate to be in a position that we have somebody that's, so caring and that we can trust to look after him and wants to do it as well. Because it's a hard job, as you both know, being working mums is hard. But yeah, so we hired my mum full time, and she still works for us now full time and helps on the childcare aspect. So that's something that's quite untraditional and quite a little bit different. And some people have mixed feelings about it, but it helps us immensely in terms of running our businesses and having that balance, and also having breaks as well. It's just, for me, I don't think there's any way to better to spend my money. I think it helps us, like I said, in so many ways. The other aspect that sort of we could come on to a little bit later was that we actually now home educate as well. So again, something that's quite on the fence. Some people love it, some people hate it. So my mum helps with that massively. So obviously I'm in learning. I work in learning. So I plan all of the, the lessons, the curriculum, making sure that we've got everything we need. And my mum helps facilitate all of that and, teach my boy really. So now we've got this really kind of unusual kind of working life, I suppose, where my mum works for us full time and helps with the childcare, but we also homeschool, and we both run businesses as well. So it's all a bit it's a bit unique. Hence why I was quite keen to get in on this conversation, because it's a bit of a different lifestyle that we have now.
Yeah, that sounds so interesting. It's really cool to hear that you home educate, because this is something that I have been, I'll say, curious about. I've seen a lot of things. I think we do a lot of, I'll call it research. That's probably a loose term, but in a far more, I suppose a looser definition of the term, but looking at things like Instagram and TikTok and those sorts of things, you see a lot of information about how people choose to educate or parent or lots of different things. And so I've seen a lot of stuff lately about home education and the benefits of it. And there are, when you become a mum, I feel as though it's the first time that you truly take on all of the anxieties of the entire world, because I think before then, I think you maybe think that you're a little bit bulletproof, and then you realize this teeny tiny baby that you're responsible for isn't bulletproof. And so, things like sending them to school and thinking about things like bullying and things like how teachers, or I struggled with this a lot, putting my little one into daycare and understanding whether they were going to treat my child the same way in daycare as I would at home, whether they were going to be gentle and speak with, kindness and all of those kinds of things. Because sometimes you don't necessarily want to, put them into an environment that's different from yours at such a young age. So that's so interesting to hear that you home educate. And I'd love to hear more about your experience with that, because the other side of that, of course, is that must be difficult in terms of all the time that goes into prepping, not just for your own business, but for your child's education. And I imagine from the sounds of things that you have a great relationship with your mum. So hopefully you get to have some input into the way those lessons are taught and the way she is with your child, which I'm sure is wonderful. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. You mentioned about school and stuff, because we did originally actually enroll him in school, and he did go to school for a few months. And I think I've always been pro home education. It's something I've always wanted to do. But I think it was something we envisioned we would do a bit later on in life, when he was a bit older, maybe sort of secondary school. But I think there's so many things I could go on to talk about. But ultimately, when we did enroll him in school, his experience wasn't a very good one, sadly. And I mean, there is good and bad everywhere, in everything. And, some things that work for one child just don't work for another. But for him, it just didn't work. And I mean, coming from a background that he actually spent quite a lot of time in full-time, like sort of kind of very school-like environments, his nurseries were brilliant, and he loved those and went to them. And I think the classes were much smaller. There was a lot more kind of one-on-one support. There was a bit more fun embedded in the learning. When he was enrolled in school, he was in a class of like 30 other children, like 30, like 4 to 5 year olds. And it really just did not work for him. He turned into a completely different person, to be fair. It's very sad to see. And I started thinking again about the homeschooling and thought, it's a bit earlier than we planned. I'm a little bit like, I don't know what to do, but I'm going to go away, do some research. I spoke to some other parents that I know that homeschool, and had some support from them, and kind of really got to feel more comfortable and confident about the idea. And then just jumped in, really. I think there's one of those things, it's actually a lot simpler than what people realize in a lot of ways. I think the mechanics of it is the hard part. Have you got the support to do it? Have you got the right environment? Have you got the right understanding of how to approach this? But the actual how you do it is very much down to you and your child. And I think that's what's so amazing about it, is being able to offer an education that's completely catered to him. And as he gets older and there's certain things that, maybe I can't teach or my mum can't teach, and, we're struggling, we'll get in tutors, we're getting help from other places. And, there's a million other things we can do to support him and educate him. But ultimately, his education centers around, where we can really push in stuff like his passions. And I think, sadly, in schools at the moment, particularly, there's just there's a ton of pressure on schools. There's less and less budget every year. There's more and more students, less and less teachers, and a lot of that passion, the fun aspects, all the really good stuff is sadly kind of filtering down in our schooling at the moment. And again, like I said, some things work well for others. And so, I mean, homeschooling might not have been the right fit for him, for instance. He may have, come home and just become incredibly lazy, and we might not have been very good with it, and it just may not have worked. But for us at the moment, it's working. And I think it's something that we'll continue to assess, like I said earlier, about how children are just constantly changing. If something changes and we decide that, maybe he wants to try school again or anything like that, we can try that again. And I think a lot of people put too much stress and weight on this decision and kind of worry too much about it, when ultimately I think it's more of a go with the flow type thing. You know your child better than anyone. And if you can make it work in terms of, like I said, the mechanics of it, and you think it, might be the right move for your child, then give it a go and, see what you can do, educate yourself, get in all the support that you need, and have a go. And if it doesn't work, then you can try and re-enroll them back in schools as well. It's not this, once they're out, that's it, you're never getting back in. And it's another thing as well. People think it's incredibly difficult to unenroll their children from school. And I was actually very shocked by how easy it was in terms of the process. And in some ways, it's actually a little bit daunting about the fact that there's very little legislation around what you should be providing for your children, but there are a ton of support groups and, like I said, communities that are there to help. And I always say that myself and my husband, we're in a very privileged situation that we have that full-time support and that help, and that we can fund that as well. I know plenty of people that would love to home educate, but just can't physically make it work. But on the back end of that, then I'd say, seek support from the communities and stuff in the things that you can add to their learning, in the ways that you can enhance their learning, and maybe, make up for some of the things that they're maybe not getting in schools, for instance. What about yourself, Tracy? What's your views on it? I know I could just ramble forever on it, to be fair.
No, do you know what, Carla? Hats off to you, because I can tell it's something that's really working for you, and it's great that you got the support from your mum, and it's well done you for stepping outside the norm, to be honest. I think that's incredibly brave, and it's fantastic that's working for you. I think our circumstances, my husband and I, are probably slightly different, where for various different reasons we don't have extended family that can help us. So it is tricky, and I pretty much at the moment work full time. And interestingly, I could see a question that Andrew's asking there about a lot of mums can't, and I think for me, I was also interested in what both of you were saying about, putting them into childcare. It was so hard. I think I put both of my babies into nursery at 5 months old. I remember sobbing when I put my son in. Not quite so upset when I put my daughter in, but I think that's because I already had a 2-year-old, and I was like, right, you both need to go in there now. And it just the way that it was. But I found that since they've been in school, it's been a lot harder with work in a way because of the school holidays. So in nursery, it's kind of like, we know that, I mean, mine only went part-time to nursery in preschool, but we know they're 3 days a week. But the school holidays are really long. I mean, I do work over the school holidays when you've got to pay for the extra camps and things like that. So I think that is a real challenge and a juggle. And obviously, I know we've shared these stories, haven't we, when they're sick and, and you've got commitments. It's really difficult. But I was actually interested in, Amy, something you said earlier about attitudes towards making it flexible for dads in the workplace. I don't know I'd be keen to hear all your experiences, but I know certainly I'm really lucky with my husband that they does have a level of flexibility for the children for school pickups and drop-offs, because we have to share it and it's equitable. What I find is more the attitude from society and the schools that the mum picks everything up, and the mums will always email you for something that they need, or the teachers will always come to the mum first, or the phone call will always be to mum if they're sick or something like that. And the nature of the work we do in learning and development, if we're on client calls, or in my case training or coaching, or I'm away, you can't necessarily pick these things up. And I just think I notice a lot of mums also putting pressure on themselves to be perfect. They've got to look good at the school gates, got to have this amazing career, they've got to have this, amazing sort of life outside of work with their kids. And I find that I think we just put so much pressure on ourselves, don't we, really? I could see you nodding there.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's so interesting what you said there about your husband having a level of flexibility. That's so great to hear that is the case in some instances. But I just wonder, in terms of, the nurseries and the schools calling the mums, is it a chicken or an egg situation? Like which came first? Because there's no instances really where my husband would be able to deviate from he works in a very male dominated industry, and there's just, I guess, not enough people pushing for that flexibility. A lot of the people that he works with have the viewpoint of that's your wife's job or that's the mum's job. And my husband certainly doesn't think that way at all, but just wouldn't have any sort of flexibility to contribute more than he does. And he certainly does everything he possibly can. But that sort of means that it's on me as a mum to pick up anywhere that I possibly can. And then, so the result of that is nurseries or childcare or even just the things that don't fall into work hours, like paying the childcare, sorting out the government accounts, the top up, the etc. That does then fall to, I feel a lot of the time, us as mums. And I wonder if attitudes shifted to where society felt like dads should be and could be and need to be more involved, that would then, if they could, then they would. Do you sort of see what I'm saying? I just don't know what comes first, whether it's they can't be flexible so that they don't do the drop-offs and the pickups, so that then by the nature of that, the calls come to us. And it's that difficult thing, isn't it? That because it does come to us, then we get in that routine of picking up everything and doing everything. And once you're in the routine of that, I feel like it's something that's very hard to change. But yeah, you mentioned, Tracy, that your husband has slightly more flexibility. Do you find that if he does do pickups and drop-offs and those sorts of things, that he's then more included in the calls, or do they all still always come to you?
I think they do still tend to come to us. And I think it's such a sort of complex area in wider society of assumptions and I guess biases that's attached to that. I mean, similar to you, Amy, I'm just really lucky. It's very much a partnership because we don't have any extended family help. It's always been like that. He respects my career, I respect his career, and we're lucky we have that level of flexibility, particularly from his employer as well. But it's little things I notice if I'm at the school gates or what have you, and you see some of the dads. What I've also noticed, and I don't think there's anything meant at all, but I think this is just a wider problem in society, is that some of the dads will all assume that none of the mums work. And I always find that really interesting, that you then have to suddenly justify, well, actually, and you find yourself sort of go, well, actually, no, I do actually go out to work. And then I went through a process of saying, I actually don't need to explain that to anybody. But and I genuinely don't think that's coming from a place of kind of malice or putting women down or anything like that. I just think it's interesting to see that it's still there and it's still a thing. So it's not just workplaces, it's the broader thing within society. I don't know, what do you think, Carla?
Yeah, it's definitely something I've come across a few times. I think it's old-fashioned thinking is kind of what I put a lot of it down to, and a lot of unconscious bias, really. And I've definitely been there, as well as a lot of people assuming that I don't work, or a lot of people assuming that I will pick certain things up and do certain things instead of my husband. I think when I actually got pregnant, I turned to my husband, and I mean, I'm quite sort of, like I said, untraditional, really. And I said to him straight away, I said, if we're going to do this is 50-50. I am not going to be a stay-at-home mum. And although I took my maternity and everything, because I breastfed my boy for the first 6 months. So I did a lot of the feeding and everything for those first 6 months, but he helped with everything. And I made that very clear from the get-go. It was like, we're both career driven. We're both very invested in our careers and we both love to work and stuff. So I couldn't do it personally. I couldn't be a full-time stay-at-home mum. I think I've got absolute respect for people that do. It's a hard job, but it's definitely, I couldn't do it myself, but it's definitely something that I've come across where, you know, it is that old school kind of assumption that, you know, anything to do with the kids, mum tends to pick up. And dad is just sort of background. I think something else I come across a lot of, actually, which has sort of frustrated me, is the shock when my husband steps up and does stuff, and the kind of public pat on the back he gets for sometimes really minimal stuff. And I remember when, like, our boy was a baby and, like, changing a nappy or something like that, and, like, the shock of people around as if, like, oh my God, dad's going to do it. And I'm like, don't, like, fuel his ego. It's completely normal for a dad to be hands-on. Like, I've definitely, we've seen quite a lot of that. I think as our boy's got a bit older and stuff, it's not as bad, but definitely when he was a baby, and my husband, like I said, has always been very hands-on, there was a lot of, like, sort of shock around us about it, which is just very, I find it very, like I said, old-fashioned. But it does exist, sadly.
Yeah, one of the things that I find so, and I'll admit I had no idea how difficult it was to be a working mum before I had a child. But one of the things that I find so strange is that we now live in a society where it is almost impossible for mums to stay at home. The cost of living, most families need to be 2-income households. And yet the way that we haven't seen the change to flexibility and to societal norms to go along with the change in needing 2-income households is my perspective on things. So when I think that that's something that needs to change, there needs to be an understanding that as things have changed and households need more money just to be able to survive and do the bare minimum, there needs to be more of an understanding that we as women can't continue to take on all of the roles that we were already doing before we wanted or needed to be in full-time work. So absolutely, Carla, it's very right that your husband should be changing the nappies and, you know, participating in those things, because we as women can't take on all of those things and need to be in full-time work. There needs to be a change in mindset and a shift in what's considered normal, I think, to go along with.
There's a saying I heard a while back, and I probably won't get it quite right, but it was along the lines of, as a mum, you're expected to work like you don't have kids, but you're expected to also look after your kids like you don't have work. And it's a common kind of expectation, I think, for working mums in reality, is, like you said, you know, a lot of the responsibility gets shifted onto mums, and you're expected to, you know, carry on your job and work, like you said, with that lack of flexibility and all, as if you don't have kids, but also look after your kids and do all of that sort of stuff as if you're not working.
I think there's also a lot, you know, a lot of guilt attached to that as well, and I think, you know, I think women more than men do feel that guilt, you know, that you're going out to work, or you run your own business, or you do these things, and it is a lot to juggle, I find. But also equally on the other side of it, I find that you talk to mums who don't work, and they almost sort of, they'll say things like, oh well, I don't go to work, I'm just a stay-at-home mum, and I always try and challenge that, because I think, well, actually that's a lot harder in some ways, because you've got to do everything. You don't get a day off, you don't get these things, and you probably get all of the home stuff and the kids all pushed onto you. When you do go out to work, you've got much more likely, depending on your partner, of course, but it's much more likely you can actually share some of the responsibilities, and it's not all down to you, and you actually still get to continue your career and do the things that you love. And it's tricky, but it's I know personally, for me, sometimes it can feel there's a lot of balls in the air. It's a little bit like a tightrope, you know. We're fine on the tightrope, but if something goes wrong, it does get very wobbly, and I think that can be a challenge, particularly in the business of what we do, to still put your best foot forward when, you know, there's a lot going on in the household. It's tricky. I don't know what your views are on that and what the views are in the workplace of working mums or working parents, etc. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm incredibly lucky in our workplace. We have got an excellent culture for working parents. And I think my manager, particularly, he is a dad to 2 kids, and he will often start late or finish early to pick up the kids. And there's something more that sets more of an example to me to say that it's totally fine. I'm not sure whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but the fact that he's a dad doing that, I feel as though that is great. That really shows that you view parenting as equal. That to me shows that you completely understand what I'm going through, not because you see your wife going through it, but because you also contribute to that yourself. So I love that example is set in my workplace. Definitely, it's so wonderful. I feel so blessed to be a part of that culture. But the guilt that I think that you get from society in general, you mentioned a lot of guilt, Tracy, and I think that's the one thing that's a bigger tackle to challenge, because as wonderful as it is to have a workplace that accepts things, that quote that you mentioned, Carla, where you're supposed to, work like you don't have kids and mother like you don't have a job. I think that's the thing that sort of I find the most difficult to get past, is that I'm part of this great culture, but I do still feel guilty when I turn up a little bit later. And do people think that I'm contributing less? And then on the flip side of that, if I'm, working later because I've done the drop off, I feel like, should I be with my daughter right now? So as you said, Tracy, there's such a tightrope that we're walking. And then as soon as, there's some tonsillitis or some sniffles thrown in there, everything's out of whack and you're always playing catch up, So yeah, it's such an interesting one. And I don't really think that there's a balance. I think I saw a really interesting quote a few days ago, and it was sort of challenging the work-life balance and talking about more of a work-life blend. And I feel as though that's probably more accurate for what I have. I'm not sure I have a balance, but I definitely have a blend. Sometimes we'll have a sick toddler sleeping on me, and I'll have the laptop open with the other hand typing away. And sometimes, being a working mum, I do feel like you just need to muddle through, and sometimes you have to mix the two, and we just sort of do what we need to do.
100%. It's kind of like, it's remembering to prioritize what's important. I mean, I love my career, I love my job, my business, and all the things that I do, but it's also then making sure that you get the balance. So I'm noticing, particularly now the kids are getting older, I have to really make time to go and watch them play their sport, or go and get involved in the things at the school, and do the things that need to be done. And funny enough, Amy, what you said about the laptop and the sick toddler. My son was off sick this week, and I the day he was off, I actually wasn't booked to do any work, but there I was working on my computer and juggling all these things. But it got to about 3 o'clock. I thought, do you know what? He's upstairs in my bedroom watching Scooby-Doo, and I just curled up next to him under the duvet and watched a bit of Scooby-Doo with him, and I just didn't feel guilty at all, because I just thought, and I think he just appreciated that one-on-one time, because we very rarely get that with the two of them together, and it's just sometimes just, remembering that you've got to kind of be there. And also it was a nice excuse for a bit of downtime for me as well, because I think one of the things with working mums, there's so many hats, there's so many roles, there's so many things we're doing, that actually, do we make enough time for us and our own self-care and investing in us and having a rest or having some time out? I think it can be really difficult to find the time to do that. What I can see, Carla, what do you think?
It's interesting, because I was literally just sort of thinking that as you were kind of talking then. I was thinking, we've talked a lot about kind of, juggling work and also juggling being a mum and looking after our kids. But how about looking after ourselves as well? And what are your thoughts on kind of self-care and having time for yourself? And I think, again, it's something that me and my husband when we decided to have our boy and, you know, run our businesses, is something that we prioritized is time for ourselves. So we do stuff like we do a weekly date night, and my mum will have our boy for a while and we'll go out and just a few hours. Sometimes we'll just stay in and watch a film, but having, you know, time set aside every single week for us to be on our own. And my boy, he's hilarious. He calls it a family date night as well, because we do a family date night and then we do a date night on our own. And he heard on the phone yesterday, because it's usually a Thursday night, me and my husband go out, and Nanny called us whilst we were out, and I think my husband mentioned that we were on date night, and you just heard my boy in the background, date night without me. It's absolutely brilliant. But I think time on our own is important as well. And I think another thing alongside sort of time on our own and time to kind of relax and rest and all the rest is something I talk about with my boy. So it's hard to explain this in a podcast because it's very short, and I don't want to go like down too many rabbit holes, but I can get overstimulated quite easily. And I find that, too much noise or touching is the thing for me. I can deal with the tantrums and all the rest, but when my boy's like foot is tapping me and then he's like sat next to me and he's rubbing up against me and like little things, I get really overstimulated. And I've tried to communicate that to a 5-year-old in a way that he doesn't get upset, because I love cuddles with my son and I love physical affection and all that sort of stuff. But I also like having my own space. And I think, you know, communicating boundaries to your children is also really important. I think, you know, the other sort of saying is, you know, if you've got a happy mum, then, you know, that mum can, you know, turn up and look after the kids and look after the husband and do the work and all the rest. But if you're not happy and you're not looked after, then ultimately everything else isn't going to be looked after as well. So I think self-care and all the things that kind of tie into that are really important as well.
I think that's such a great point. And I think as a working mum, we talked a little bit about guilt earlier, the guilt of knowing how packed your schedule is and knowing, okay, I work full time. I should be spending all of the rest of the time I can with my child. Otherwise, I feel immensely guilty. But then also sometimes you get to a point where you think, that time is not valuable. That time I'm spending with my child is not valuable time spent if I am, as you said, really overstimulated or a little bit shorter than usual. It's not fair. It's better to take an hour for yourself and have a little bit of time so that you can come back and be the best version of yourself, you know, and then really make that time valuable. And just speaking on that, I'm maybe going to butcher this statistic now, but I read something that said that working mums actually spend a larger percentage of quality time with their kids. And I think that probably speaks to how hard stay-at-home mums work in the day to keep all of the housework and all of those plates spinning and those sorts of things. But I think because we're working mums and we spend so much of our week, you know, out at work or whatever it is, or working at home as it might be, that when we have time, we really do invest that and make sure that that's quality time, even if it's just, you know, watching Scooby-Doo when your son is sick or whatever it might be. But making sure that you are happy enough in yourself to give that quality time when you are present, I think is such a great point, and is definitely something that when my daughter was a baby, I didn't take the time for myself, and I really found that had a lasting negative effect. And now making sure that I'm spending time for self-care is something that has to be a priority, so that other plates don't start to fall.
Oh gosh, absolutely, Amy. I've learned over the years that sleep is important, because it's a real challenge. Like if you've been delivering training all day, giving your best foot further forward, and then you suddenly got to pick them up from school, you make the switch and you want to be present and hear about their day, and then you got to get home and it's homework and it's bath time and it's getting their stuff ready for the next day, and it's splitting up arguments and squabbles, and it's my son's getting a bit older now, so it's dealing with a lot more complex emotional challenges or problems that you might be having at school or whatever that might be. And by the time all that's finished and it's 9 o'clock and I've finally managed to get them into bed, I've learned I just go to bed at the same time. Yeah. And it might sound a little bit sad, but I'm thinking, no, sleep is important. I've got to if I'm going to do this, I've got to kind of, manage myself a bit better. But you're so right, Amy, about the making quality time, even at the weekend, even if it's just for half an hour, to do something they want to do, or kick a football about in the garden, or play a game. I don't want my kids to grow up and then think, oh, mum never played with us, or never did anything with us. I think that's important as well, but it's not easy. It's tough, and I always find my attitude towards being a working mum is one day at a time. We'll all get through one day. Carla, I could see you nodding. What's it like for you?
I mean, something I sort of really try and preach is because I'm a big sort of pro person for self-development, growth, like I said, quality time, looking after yourself first. Is that we can't live every day as if it's our last, but every day we should be doing things that we love and enjoy. And I think that's really important, whether that's work with your children or with yourself. Like I said, if you have to look after yourself first so that you can look after other people, whether that be your clients or your children or your outer family. So every day I always try and make, even if it's just a little bit of time for myself, time with my boy, time with my husband, time to do something that I love as well, so a bit of all of those things. And then I feel like that day is like a success, basically.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you said about sort of self-development and growth. And I think that is something you go through at lightning speed when you first become a mum. And something I've learned that completely has changed what used to be one of the most frustrating times of the day for me, which was bedtime, which is that actually, if I just let pretty much anything slide at bedtime, it will go smoother and I will end up less frustrated at the end of it. So I used to have like a schedule in my mind for by 6:15 we'll have the pajamas on, 6:20 we'll have picked a book, but actually despite routine being really important for me and my daughter, if I just let things go a little, take their own course a little bit more, I will end up less frustrated, and she will then feed off that energy. She'll be calmer. She'll be more willing to sleep. And I think that that's one of those things that, you're constantly learning as a mum, and that self-development and that growth, all you can do is go through it and learn as you go, because there's no way to prepare yourselves for these sort of individual scenarios before you've actually been thrust into them. So I love what you said about self-development and growth, Carla. I think that's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always have the saying that you pick your battles, don't you? You kind of you don't sweat the small stuff. I always say that. Just prioritize what's important, but don't. We put so much pressure on ourselves as working mums and as mums in general for everything to be perfect. And I just think that pressure doesn't help. It's I've learned to just not put so much pressure on myself, but also to not judge others, whether you're a working mum or not. You don't know people's individual circumstances. If you see the mum tearing into school who's late for pickup, who's just had a really busy day at work and stressed or what have you, we've just all got to learn to just suspend that judgment, just be a bit kinder to one another as mums, and we're all in it together, aren't we? Not whether you're working, whether you're not. I think that's one thing that I find that's really important to me. That's why I always pull those mums up and say, oh, I don't go to work. I'm like, no, you do. Please never say that. You do.
24 hours a day, you do.
You do. Because it's really hard.
Oh, I completely agree. And I just think that one of the funniest things is you have no idea what battles that mum has faced already that day. If it's 8 a.m., they may have still been battling on from last night. They could have been up 12 times. You have no idea. And I think, although ironically, I think probably we are kindest to ourselves last, but you definitely grow in empathy and in kindness and in all of those wonderful things when you become a mum. And we definitely should, extend that to other mums, but extend that to ourselves as well. Just give ourselves the benefit of the doubt every now and then.
I think it's a great thing being kind of passionate about learning and the industry and then having children, because it's just a constant learning journey.
100%. I often find myself coaching my children. It works really well, actually. Being a coach myself, you know, and I think my favourite coaching line for my children is, what can mummy do to help right now?
Yeah.
I find that actually works really well. But it is interesting with all the self-development piece and, you know, the demonstrating empathy and communication and coaching and helping them develop things like emotional intelligence. I know it's a big thing that I'm going through with my son at the moment. I've found that quite an interesting journey to see what that looks like through the lens of younger children. And that's helped me learn a lot about behaviour. Yeah.
It's really interesting what you can learn, isn't it, from your kids that applies to the industry. I think something that I've found really interesting is my boy's 5 and how he gets on with digital kind of technology and stuff. And I mean, he can't read yet, but he knows how to play these games. And just watching him use stuff and sort of understanding what goes through his brain and, you know, user design, how it applies and everything. I think it's fascinating. I absolutely love the way that we approach, you know, children's learning. I think it's definitely reignited my passion a little bit, all the stuff I've got at home for all the really exciting things that we can use to teach him. I mean, we've got an interactive globe that uses augmented reality, AR on your phone, and you scan over certain parts and then a 3D animal pops up on the phone and it talks to you and tells you all about that place on the world. It's the stuff that we can do at the moment and how our kids learn. I think is such an exciting thing to be involved in the learning industry and then involved in, you know, teaching my boy.
That's such a wonderful point, isn't it? Because who wouldn't want to learn from an interactive globe that has pop-up animals? Who wouldn't want to learn in that way? It's so nice to think, you know, at what age do we deem learning no longer needs to be fun? It definitely it always is something that should be engaging and interactive. And I see, you know, I'm sure like both of you have read so much stuff about parenting, and particularly at this age with my daughter, she's only 2, you know, everything says she learns through play, and I just think that's such a wonderful stage of life to be in, isn't it? Everything should be fun. Everything's engaging. You can learn from anything that you do, or, you know, anybody that you're around. So taking that mindset of, you know, it's wonderful to have the time to learn. I think that's something to be cherished for sure.
It's something I preach in my business and have done for years is, you know, just like you said, why did it become, you know, now you're an adult, it doesn't need to be fun. Yes, it does. Yes, please. I'd like it to be fun. Alongside the, you know, the science behind it, that if it's enjoyable and relative, you know, you are going to retain that a lot better for longer. But also just, learning should be fun. It should be fun no matter what the age. And I think home educating my boy is just, opened my eyes to like even more so some of the stuff we have. I've spent decent bit of my money on really fun immersive learning stuff because I get just as excited to get involved and have fun and play with it and, you know, teach him in all these different ways. And we always seek to tie his passions into things when we find, I mean, he's been really interested in dinosaurs. So I've been trying to kind of build in my free time a little digital dinosaur maths game and like really tying in his passions to sort of how he learns and how we can do that as adults. And I think if we approached all learning a little bit like that, I know, you know, not everything can be customized and all, but just seeking to really build on people's passions and make it fun, what a different world it would be.
100%, I think. And also one of the things that we always try and you know, tell the kids is just you know, well, first of all, enjoy yourself and enjoy school and the learning, but, you know, just get involved in the things that you're really interested in. It doesn't matter what it is, but if you're interested in a certain topic, and they do have some unusual hobbies, there's a lot of opportunities for them now at school, which is brilliant. But if that's your passion, that's something you want to do, go do. And the other thing we often talk about is, you know, I try not to put too much pressure on the kids for academics or what you know, you've got to get the top grades. I don't think that's really our attitude. What we say to them is just try your best.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to worry about what grades you get or comparing yourself to others or what everybody else is doing. Just be your unique self and try your best. And importantly, as you say, Carla, have fun and enjoy it as much as possible. I think the more pressure you put on them, sometimes that can have the opposite effect, really. And it's the happy kids that learn. So again, it's probably going back to the whole, don't sweat the small stuff. The more relaxed you can be, like you were saying, Amy, it does rub off on the children as well. But it's hard when you're juggling a lot of things inside of work as well. So yeah, it's hard.
Definitely.
What about kind of calls to action generally about what people need to know about working mums, or things like that? Any sort of final thoughts on that?
I think one of my kind of advices would be kind of like what we were saying earlier is making sure that you take time for yourself, making sure that you look after yourself first so that you can look after others, and that ultimately everything is a journey and you can learn in everything, and not to put so much weight, pressure or emphasis on getting something done by a certain date or doing something or achieving something, and just enjoying the journey, learning as you go. I think you said, Amy, earlier about making kind of like quite regimented plans and stuff, and I'm very much like that, very organized, like to plan everything out. But I think you do learn in business and in being a parent that you do have to just go with the flow and learn to just enjoy it, and I think that is a big part about being a working mum.
I love that. I think my final thoughts would be, we talked about empathy and kindness to other mums. I think my final thoughts would be definitely just be kind to yourself too. And that these things, they grow and they change in time, and what things look like right now, it might look very different in 6 months or 2 years. And that's fine. Like you said at the start, Carla, if it works for you right now, that's great. If it stops working for you, then we'll address that at that point. So yeah, just be kind to yourself, and try and enjoy all the moments that you can. Try and take everything as individual and enjoy those moments, when they're there, and try not to harp on the things that are a bit stressful or not going your way, and try to just be in the moments where possible and enjoy them. Because I feel like a great thing is we're blessed to be able to do something that we love and be able to have our wonderful kids to love as well. And I try to think about that on days where I've just been hit in the face or something along those lines.
Yeah, 100%. I think I'd echo that, Amy. Just be kind to yourself. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't try and make everything perfect, that you've got to, have all these roles and wear all these hats, and it's all got to be perfect 100% of the time. It's just try your best, enjoy the journey. It changes. They grow up quick. And prioritize what's important, really. I don't know if we've 100% got the balance right, but it's always in our family a little bit work in progress, if you like, and not being afraid. A lot of other mums as well to share jobs. Mums tend to take everything. They take the mantle, don't they? They're their own worst enemies to a large extent, but not being afraid to just kind of push back, share and things like that, because I do appreciate there's other working mums out there that don't necessarily have those dynamics that are equitable. So
yeah, that's so lovely to hear both of your thoughts and experience. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Absolutely. It's been great to see you today, and great to meet you, Amy and Carla. No, it's really, really enjoyed chatting with you. Like I said, Carla, you're right. We probably could have talked for a lot longer.
I think I could just go on and on. I have to cut myself short, especially when it comes to stuff like home education, where I'm really passionate. I could just be sat here for hours just on that.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? Even though we've been sat here for almost an hour, but I feel like there are so many topics that we didn't even scratch the surface of. I think we could talk about just about anything it's so true.
I don't know if we also really sort of delved into more about attitudes in the workplace and policies and things like that. It's such a huge topic, and still a lot of work to do there, I think. But
definitely, I do feel as though in the last, perhaps it's since COVID, of course, because so many people got to work from home, but there has definitely been a shift, hasn't there? And I think because there was that overnight change where everybody had to learn to be more flexible, I think the blessing that we can take from COVID is that it has made more people able to work in a sort of flexible manner, which is obviously great. And I hope to see that continue in in more and more industries.
Absolutely, because you often, I think dads have said to me, COVID was great because I got to get a little bit more involved. And people make the assumption that dads don't want to be involved. In fact, the opposite. I think my husband was made redundant when my daughter was 2. He spent a whole year at home with her and he loved it. And he said, I'm so lucky to have had that time with my daughter while she was so young. And he's always been very hands-on. He said to me, what dads can say that they've done that? And I think as a result, that's made their relationship really close. And we've always had the relationship where people always say, your husband's brilliant. He's so hands-on. What's your secret? And I say, well, the secret is I've never actually told him what to do or taken over in any way. I've always gone, if he's asked me like, well, how much food do they need or what do they need? I've always gone, I don't know, I'm making it up as I go along myself. So, and it's helped empower him and build his confidence that he doesn't feel like he's got to come and ask my permission for what does or doesn't need to be done with the children. I've always let him do it his own way. And I think that's really helped us get on the same page. Because I don't think that dynamic always happens in a lot of families as well, and it helps. He as a result, he's got great relationships with the kids, and he did change all the nappies, so that seems quite a while ago now. But yeah,
that's wonderful, isn't it? I feel as though dads sometimes, I mean, I understand there are certain circumstances where this isn't the case, but a lot of dads really do want to be involved more, and I hope that we're working towards a workforce and a society that can allow for that to happen. Because, as you said, your daughter's got such a great relationship with her dad now, and that's a blessing, and that's something that feeds into the rest of her life. And I think there's a statistic that says millennial dads are the most involved dads that we've ever had or have had so far, for example. So I hope that that's because of changing attitudes and a changing workplace environment, and that will continue, because kids need 2 parents.
Should do like a 3
thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much, Carla and Tracy. It's been so lovely talking to you today, and I can't wait to continue this conversation, because I think we've got so much more we could talk about. So hopefully we can continue to catch up online and on LinkedIn.
Yes, definitely.
100%. Thank you so much, Carla and Amy. It's been great chatting with you today. Thank you.
This was another cracking episode. What you don't know is during the recording, we had technical issues here and a laptop shut down. What our brilliant guest did was carry on regardless and produce an amazing episode. And this episode is a little longer than usual. Do you know what? It deserves to be. A massive thank you to Tracy, Amy and Carla for their time and thoughtful conversation. Their contact details, as always, are in the show notes, along with links to topics that they picked up, our website, future episodes and our donation page. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and next time it's the digital one. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.